At exactly 2:17 a.m., every door in the most secure technology facility in the country unlocked simultaneously. Alarms screamed, engineers froze, and on the main screen, two words appeared that made CEO Vivian Hart's blood run cold. Manual layer active. 9 hours earlier, she'd fired the quiet janitor who'd tried to warn her. Now her billion-dollar empire was collapsing, and the only man who could save it was home with his dying daughter, probably laughing at her desperation. This is the story of how the most powerful woman in tech learned that genius doesn't always wear a suit. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Vivian Hart's corner office made everything look sterile and cold, which was exactly how she preferred it. Clean lines, clear decisions, no mess. She'd built Meridian Blackstone from a garage startup into a classified defense contractor worth $3.2 billion by the time she turned 30, and she hadn't done it by tolerating weakness or sentiment. Ms. Hart, the morning terminations are ready for your signature. Rebecca Chen, her head of HR, stood in the doorway holding a tablet like it might explode. Rebecca had been with the company for 6 years and still looked nervous every time she entered Vivian's office. Good. Fear kept people sharp. How many? Vivian didn't look up from her screen, where she was reviewing the final checklist for tonight's system update. Phase 7 had been 18 months in development. It would revolutionize their AI defense protocols, cement 3 new government contracts, and personally earn her a cover story in Tech Fortune magazine. 11. Mostly redundancies from the third shift maintenance crew. We're automating most of those functions with the new update anyway. Fine. Vivian held out her hand for the tablet. Rebecca hesitated. There's one you might want to review personally. Ethan Cole. He's been here since the beginning, actually. Before you acquired the original, I don't care about tenure. What's his function? Night maintenance, building C server levels. But he left a note requesting to speak with you before the update goes live tonight. He seemed... No. Vivian signed the screen without reading the names. If he had something important to say, he should have put it through proper channels. I'm not running a charity for people who can't follow protocol. Rebecca's mouth tightened, but she took the tablet back. I'll process these immediately. After she left, Vivian returned to her checklist. Temperature controls, backup generators, security protocols, network redundancies. Everything was perfect. Everything was always perfect because she demanded it. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Webb, her lead systems engineer. We're go for tonight, he said without preamble. Marcus didn't waste time on pleasantries either, which was one reason she tolerated him. Final tests came back clean. The AI integration will be seamless. You're certain? No variables we haven't accounted for? A pause. Well, there's that legacy code in the foundational layer, the stuff from the original system before we acquired it. We still haven't fully mapped all of it, but it hasn't caused problems in 6 years, so we proceed. The update goes live at midnight. I want you here personally. Understood. Vivian ended the call and stood at her window, looking down at the Meridian campus. 4 buildings arranged in a square around a central courtyard, all black glass and brushed steel. Beautiful. Powerful. Hers. The morning passed in a blur of meetings, budget reviews, personnel evaluations, a conference call with a Pentagon liaison who tried to lowball their contract renewal and quickly learned that Vivian Hart didn't negotiate from weakness. At 8:47 a.m., she was heading to the executive parking garage when she nearly collided with someone in the hallway. Excuse me, Ms. Hart. The man was in his early 30s, wearing faded jeans and a gray zip-up hoodie that had seen better days. Work boots with scuffed toes. A backpack covered in what looked like children's crayon drawings, stick figures and hearts, and something that might have been a cat. His face was tired, lines around his eyes that seemed too deep for his age. I don't have time for... She started to move past him. My name is Ethan Cole. I work night maintenance in Building C. I need 2 minutes about tonight's update. Something about his voice made her pause. Not the words, but the tone. Calm. Steady. Like he wasn't asking for her time, but simply stating a fact. I'm terminating you this morning, Mr. Cole. Whatever concerns you have are no longer relevant. That's your decision to make. He didn't flinch, didn't beg, just watched her with those tired eyes. But the update you're planning will fail. Catastrophically. I need to show you why. Vivian felt her jaw tighten. She'd dealt with disgruntled employees before. The conspiracy theorists, the attention seekers, the ones who thought their minimal contributions entitled them to an audience with the CEO. Security, she said, loud enough for the two guards at the end of the hall to hear. I wrote the core, Ethan said quietly. What? The foundational layer your entire system runs on. I wrote it 7 years ago before you acquired Nexus Solutions. And I built in failsafes you don't know about because the original documentation was never transferred. Your update is going to trigger a cascade failure that will lock down the entire facility. The security guards were approaching. Vivian held up a hand to stop them, studying Ethan's face. He didn't look crazy, didn't look like he was lying, just looked tired and sad and absolutely certain. You're a janitor, she said. Now, yeah, I used to be other things. He shifted his backpack. One of the crayon drawings showed two stick figures holding hands, one big and one small, under a rainbow. Look, I know how this sounds. I know you don't know me, but I've been maintaining the legacy code on night shifts for 6 years because I'm the only one who understands how it works. Your engineers have been building on top of a foundation they've never fully mapped, and this update, specifically the AI integration protocol in Section 7, is going to conflict with the safety patch I installed in the manual override layer. Bars meet. There is no manual override layer. Vivian crossed her arms. I've reviewed every schematic of this system. You've reviewed everything that was documented, but I kept one layer off the books, a failsafe in case someone tried to push the system past its tolerances, which is exactly what you're doing tonight. Then show me, right now. Prove it. Ethan glanced at his watch, an old digital thing with a cracked face, and shook his head. I can't. I have to pick up my daughter from her before-school medical appointment in 40 minutes. But if you give me access to Terminal 7 in Building C at 8 tonight, I can walk you through it before the update goes live. Your daughter. Vivian's voice dripped with contempt. You want me to risk a multi-billion-dollar operation on the word of a maintenance worker who's too busy with childcare to do his job? Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. I'm trying to help you, he said softly. I don't care about the job. I don't care about your company. But a lot of people work here, and if this system fails the way I think it will, you're going to have a real mess on your hands. Just delay the update by 48 hours. Let me show you what I'm talking about. That's all I'm asking. Remove him, Vivian told the guards. They moved in, one on each side. Ethan didn't resist. Just let them take his arms and start walking him toward the exit. You're making a mistake, he called back. Not shouting, just stating it. Check the logs from 3 years ago, October 15th. You'll see a cascade event that stopped itself. That was my fail-safe. And tonight, you're going to need it again. Then they were gone, and Vivian was alone in the hallway. She stood there for a moment, feeling something uncomfortable in her chest. It felt almost like doubt, which was ridiculous. She hadn't gotten where she was by second-guessing herself based on the ravings of a janitor with a backpack covered in children's drawings. Her phone buzzed. Calendar reminder. Executive board meeting, 9 a.m. Vivian pushed the encounter from her mind and headed for the conference room. The board meeting ran until noon, then lunch with a venture capital firm interested in their subsidiary projects, then a video interview with Tech Weekly, then reviews of the marketing campaign for their new civilian security app. By 6 p.m., Vivian was back in her office, and the encounter with Ethan Cole had faded to a vague irritation at the back of her mind. Marcus Webb appeared in her doorway, holding 2 coffee cups. He handed her one, black, no sugar, exactly how she took it, and settled into the chair across from her desk. Final countdown, he said. T-minus 6 hours. Any last-minute issues? Nothing significant. Johnson flagged some weird activity in the legacy code earlier this week, but it stabilized on its own. Probably just some old automated process cycling through. Vivian took a sip of coffee. The legacy code. From the original Nexus acquisition. Yeah, why? Who wrote it? Marcus frowned. Honestly, no idea. The documentation from that acquisition was a disaster. We got the IP rights and the core system, but half the personnel files were incomplete, and most of the original team scattered after we took over. Why do you ask? No reason. just being thorough. But after Marcus left, Vivian found herself pulling up the acquisition files from 6.5 years ago. Nexus Solutions had been a struggling startup with one brilliant piece of technology, an AI defense framework that could predict and counter cyber attacks before they fully materialized. Vivian had bought them for $87 million, stripped the useful technology, and let the rest of the company dissolve. She scrolled through the personnel records from that time. Most were redacted or incomplete. Project leads, engineers, programmers, all listed by role rather than name because of the classified nature of the work. Then she saw it. Lead architect E. Cole, level 5 clearance, deep black classification. The file was mostly empty. No photos, no contact information. Just a note. Resigned November 2019, personal circumstances. Clearance revoked. November 2019. 6 months after Vivian had acquired Nexus, she sat back in her chair staring at the screen. No. It was absurd. The same guy couldn't have gone from lead architect on a classified AI system to night janitor in the same facility. People didn't fall that far. But something nagged at her. That calm certainty in his voice. The way he'd known specific details. Section 7, the AI integration protocol, the manual override layer. Vivian pulled up the security footage from this morning and found the timestamp of her encounter with Ethan. The video quality was good enough to get a clear look at his face. Tired, worn, but there was something in his eyes, a sharpness that didn't match the rest of his appearance. On impulse, she opened the system logs and searched for October 15th, 3 years ago. The file was flagged red, critical event. At 3:33 a.m., the system had experienced what the logs called a spontaneous cascade event. Cooling systems failed. Backup generators kicked in late. The entire network had started shutting down in sequence, building by building. Then, at 3:47 a.m., it stopped. The log notes were sparse. Event resolved. Unknown origin. System self-corrected via undocumented protocol. No damage, no data loss. Vivian felt cold. She grabbed her phone and called Rebecca Chen. I need the file on Ethan Cole, the employee we terminated this morning. It's almost 7, Ms. Hart. I'm at my daughter's. Now, Rebecca. A sigh. Give me 10 minutes. It took 12. The file came through to Vivian's email, and she opened it immediately. Ethan James Cole, age 32, hired 6 years ago for night maintenance, Building C, no college degree listed. Previous employment? Redacted due to classification. Emergency contact, Mia Cole, daughter, age 8. The medical insurance claims were extensive. Regular cardiology appointments, multiple hospitalizations, specialist consultations, all for Mia Cole, diagnosed with a congenital heart defect requiring ongoing treatment and eventual surgery. Vivian stared at the screen for a long time. A man with level 5 clearance, lead architect on a deep black AI system, reduced to mopping floors on the night shift. Because of a sick daughter. Because he needed the insurance and the flexible hours and couldn't afford to be anything more than invisible. She thought about his backpack covered in crayon drawings. She thought about his eyes, tired but sharp. She thought about the way he'd said, I don't care about the job. I don't care about your company. Her phone rang. Marcus Webb. We're starting preliminary shutdown sequences, he said. Everything's on track. You should head down to the control center if you want to watch the magic happen. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Vivian said. She ended the call and sat in the silence of her office, looking out at the Meridian campus as the sun set behind Building C. Then she stood, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the elevator. Ishke. The control center was in the basement of Building A, a large room filled with monitors and workstations where the night engineering team coordinated all critical operations. By the time Vivian arrived, a dozen people were already there, running final checks. Marcus stood at the central console, looking like a conductor before a symphony. Status? Vivian asked. Green across the board. We start the update sequence in 90 minutes. She moved to the observation window that looked down into the server room, rows and rows of black towers, humming with quiet power. This was the heart of Meridian, the brain that protected military installations, coordinated defense systems, predicted threats before they materialized. And somewhere in there, buried in the code, was a failsafe no one knew about except a janitor who'd tried to warn her. Marcus, delay the update. He turned, frowning. What? Why? I need 48 hours to review some concerns about the legacy code. Concerns? From who? Vivian hesitated. If she told him about Ethan, he'd think she was losing her mind, making operational decisions based on the claims of a fired maintenance worker. From me, she said. I want to personally verify some of the integration protocols before we proceed. Marcus's frown deepened. Vivian, we've been planning this for 18 months. We have government observers scheduled to arrive tomorrow morning to witness the upgrade. If we delay now, it's going to raise questions about our technical competence. I don't care about... The lights flickered. Everyone in the control center looked up. That's weird, someone muttered. Then the monitors went black. For 3 seconds, the room was completely dark except for the emergency exit signs. When the lights came back on, every screen in the control center displayed the same message. Preliminary handshake sequence initiated. Marcus rushed to his console, typing frantically. What the hell? We didn't start anything yet. The update isn't scheduled for another 87 minutes. Kill it, Vivian said. I'm trying. It's not responding to manual override. Around the room, engineers scrambled to their stations. Voices overlapped, tense and confused. I'm locked out of the temperature controls. Backup systems aren't responding. The security grid just went into full lockdown. Vivian's phone buzzed. Building-wide alert. All exterior doors locked. All interior doors locked. Emergency protocols engaged. Marcus, what is happening? He was pale, staring at his screen. The system is running some kind of autonomous sequence. It's like it's checking itself, going through every protocol, every subsystem, like it's looking for something. Looking for what? I don't know. This code isn't in any of our documentation. The main screen changed. Searching for primary authentication. EJC. Confirm identity. Vivian felt her stomach drop. EJC Ethan James Cole. Jesus Christ, she whispered. Marcus looked at her. Do you know what this means? Before she could answer, every light in the building went out. Emergency power kicked in after 5 seconds, bathing everything in dim red. The monitors stayed black. Then, one by one, they came back on. Primary authentication not found, manual layer active, awaiting EJC confirmation system. Hold 14 hours, 23 minutes, 56 seconds, a countdown. 14 hours, 23 minutes, 56 seconds. And ticking down. What happens when it hits 0? Vivian asked quietly. Marcus's hands were shaking as he typed, trying to access something, anything. I have no idea, but based on what I'm seeing in these logs, if the manual layer doesn't get its confirmation, the entire system is going to shut down, permanently. Every protocol, every backup, every safeguard. It's a scorched earth failsafe. Can you override it? Not without the authentication key, which apparently only one person has. Vivian pulled out her phone and called Rebecca Chen again. I need Ethan Cole's home address, right now. The address led to a small house in a quiet suburb 40 minutes from the Meridian campus. Single story, white siding that needed repainting, a small yard with a chain-link fence. Vivian pulled her Tesla into the driveway at 11:47 p.m. and sat there for a moment, trying to figure out what she was going to say. I'm sorry I fired you. I'm sorry I didn't listen. Please come save my company. No, that wasn't right. Ethan Cole didn't care about apologies or the company. She thought about the medical files. The daughter. Vivian got out of the car and walked to the front door. Light showed through the curtains. She could hear music playing inside, something soft and orchestral. She rang the doorbell. Footsteps. The porch light came on. The door opened and Ethan Cole stood there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt that said, World's Okayest Dad. He looked at her without surprise, like he'd been expecting this. Ms. Hart. The system is in lockdown, Vivian said. It's asking for you. I know. You know? How could you possibly? I set it up to ping my phone if the manual layer ever activated. He held up his cracked screen watch, which was apparently smarter than it looked. Got the alert about 30 minutes ago. They stared at each other in the porch light. I need you to come back, Vivian said. I need you to fix this. I warned you this morning. You called security. I know. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Please, whatever you want, name your price. Ethan glanced back into the house. Vivian could see past him into a small living room, a worn couch, a TV showing a paused Disney movie, and a little girl asleep on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin. She had dark hair like Ethan's, and even from here, Vivian could see the medical equipment next to the couch. Heart monitor, oxygen tank, IV stand. Can't leave right now, Ethan said quietly. Mia had a rough day. Her numbers were low this afternoon, and she finally just fell asleep about an hour ago. I need to stay until morning. The system will collapse in 14 hours. I know, I built the timer that way on purpose. 14 hours is enough time for someone to call me, explain the situation, and ask nicely for help. Which you're doing, so that's good. But it's not enough time to try to hack through the failsafe, which would just make things worse. He said it so calmly, like he was explaining a recipe. You designed this? Vivian felt anger rising despite her desperation. You deliberately built a weapon into our system? I built a safeguard, Ethan corrected. And it's not your system. I wrote it before you ever heard of Nexus Solutions. The fact that you acquired the company doesn't change who created the foundation. Everything else runs on. He leaned against the doorframe. I told you this morning what would happen. You chose not to believe me. So this is revenge? Punishment for firing you? No, this is exactly what I told you it was. A failsafe to prevent catastrophic failure. Your update would have triggered it anyway. The only difference is that the lockdown started early because your team got sloppy with the preliminary sequence. He checked his watch again. You've still got plenty of time. I'll come in tomorrow morning around 7. That gives us 7 hours to fix everything before the deadline. Tomorrow morning? What am I supposed to tell my board? The government observers? My engineering team? Tell them the truth. That you pushed a system past its tolerances and it pushed back. Or make something up. I don't care. He started to close the door. 7 a.m., Ms. Hart. I'll meet you at Terminal 7 in Building C. That's where the manual layer access is. Wait, I'm not negotiating. My daughter's 8 years old and dying of a heart defect that requires constant monitoring. I've structured my entire life around being here when she needs me. Your company emergency doesn't change that. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. You want my help? You get it on my terms. 7 a.m. Take it or leave it. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to demand, wanted to threaten, but she looked past Ethan at the little girl on the couch, the medical equipment, the crayon drawings taped to the walls, and something in her chest hurt. 7 a.m., she said quietly. I'll be there. Ethan nodded and closed the door. Vivian walked back to her car and sat behind the wheel for a long time, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Then she pulled out her phone and called Marcus. Tell the team to get some rest. We're not doing anything until morning. Vivian, we can't just... Morning, Marcus. That's final. She drove back to the Meridian campus and spent the rest of the night in her office, watching the countdown timer on her monitor tick slowly towards 0, and thinking about a man who'd given up everything to stay home with his daughter. At 3:17 a.m., Vivian gave up pretending she could sleep and returned to the control center. The red emergency lighting cast everything in shades of blood and shadow, making the engineers at their stations look like ghosts haunting a shipwreck. Marcus was still there, hunched over his console with his 5th cup of coffee going cold beside his keyboard. His eyes were red-rimmed and his hair stood up in weird angles where he'd been running his hands through it. Anything? Vivian asked, though she already knew the answer. Nothing. I've tried every backdoor, every admin protocol, every hack I can think of. The system just sits there, waiting, like it's got all the time in the world. He gestured at the main screen where the countdown continued its relentless march. 9 hours, 42 minutes, and then everything dies. Not everything, just our access to it. Marcus looked at her like she'd grown a second head. That's the same thing. Without access, the system is worthless. All our contracts, all our projects, all our data, locked away forever in a box we can't open. Vivian pulled up a chair and sat down, staring at the screens. She'd spent the last 4 hours reading everything she could find about Nexus Solutions and its collapse. Most of the articles were from tech blogs and industry newsletters, the kind of small print obituaries that marked the death of another startup that couldn't make it. But one article from the Technology Ethics Journal had caught her attention. It was titled The Human Cost of Acquisition Culture, and it featured an anonymous interview with someone described only as a former lead engineer at a recently acquired defense startup. The engineer had talked about the pressure to meet impossible deadlines, the shortcuts taken to satisfy investor demands, the moment when technical excellence became secondary to profit margins. And then, near the end of the interview, a single paragraph that Vivian had read over and over. I had a choice to make: keep fighting for a company that had already been gutted and sold, or go home and be there for the person who actually needed me. Some people might say I gave up. I say I finally figured out what was worth fighting for. The article was dated December 2019, 1 month after Ethan Cole had resigned. "Tell me about the original Nexus team," Vivian said quietly. Marcus rubbed his eyes. "I wasn't here for that acquisition. That was before my time. But you've worked with the code they built. You must have some sense of who they were. Brilliant. Paranoid. They built the system like they were expecting it to be attacked by someone who knew exactly how it worked." He laughed bitterly, which in retrospect shows better judgment than we gave them credit for. "This manual layer, it's elegant. Simple but unbreakable. Whoever designed it understood that the best security isn't complexity. It's architecture that requires a human being to make a conscious choice." "EJC," Vivian said. "That's the authentication it's asking for. Ethan James Cole." Marcus's fingers stopped moving on his keyboard. "The janitor? The guy you fired yesterday? The lead architect who built the foundation for everything we've been working with for the last 6 years. That's impossible. Why would someone with that kind of skill? Because his daughter is dying." The words came out harsher than Vivian intended. "Because he needed insurance and flexible hours and a job that would let him be there when she needed him. And because we gave him that job without ever bothering to ask who he was or what he could do." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When's he coming in?" 7 a.m. "Can we trust him? I mean, he literally built a kill switch into our system. He built a safeguard." "There's a difference." Vivian stood up, her back aching from the hours of sitting. "And yes, we can trust him, because he could have let this whole thing burn, could have ignored my call, stayed home with his daughter, and let us tear ourselves apart trying to fix it. But he didn't. He's coming back." "For what?" "We fired him. What's he got to gain?" Vivian thought about Ethan's face in the porch light, the way he'd looked back at his daughter sleeping on the couch. "Nothing. That's what makes him different from us." She left Marcus in the control center and walked through the empty facility. The lockdown had sent everyone home except essential personnel, and the hallways felt like a museum after hours. Her footsteps echoed off polished floors that Ethan had probably mopped 100 times while the engineers worked overhead, completely oblivious to the fact that the foundation of everything they did existed because of him. Building C was the oldest structure on campus, the only one that had survived from the original Nexus facility. Vivian had always meant to renovate it, bring it up to the same sleek standards as the newer buildings, but had never found the budget priority. Now she understood why it had never been quite the same as the others. It wasn't just a building, it was a monument to something that had existed before her, something she'd consumed without ever understanding what it was. She found Terminal 7 on the lower level, in a room that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. Old monitors, mechanical keyboards, chairs with torn upholstery. A space that had been forgotten by everyone except the person who needed it. Vivian sat down at the terminal and stared at the blank screen. At 6:15 a.m., her phone rang. Rebecca Chen. "I'm seeing news alerts about Meridian," Rebecca said without preamble. "Something about a system malfunction? The board is freaking out. They want an emergency meeting." "Tell them we're handling it." "Vivian, I need more than that. I've got reporters calling, investors asking questions, government liaisons demanding updates. I need to give them something. Tell them the truth." "We attempted a system update without properly understanding the foundational architecture, and we triggered a security protocol. We're resolving it this morning." "That makes us sound incompetent." "We are incompetent. At least about this." Vivian checked the time. 6:17. "Schedule the board meeting for noon. By then we'll either have answers or we won't, and either way they deserve to know what happened." She ended the call before Rebecca could argue. At 6:45, Marcus appeared in the doorway of the Terminal 7 room, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Peace offering," he said, handing her one. "I've been thinking about what you said, about trust." And you're right. We built an empire on top of someone else's foundation without ever asking if we understood it. That's on us." He leaned against the wall, looking exhausted. I pulled some old personnel files. Did you know Ethan Cole had 3 PhD offers before he was 25? MIT, Stanford, Caltech. He turned them all down to work at Nexus because they were doing classified work that actually mattered. I didn't know that. Yeah, well, neither did anyone else. He kept his head down, did the work, and when the company got sold, he just vanished. Except he didn't vanish. He was here the whole time, right under our noses. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. Makes you wonder what else we've been missing. At 6:58, Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from the security gate. "Ethan Cole here to see you." Her fingers were shaking as she typed back. "Send him to Building C, lower level, Terminal 7. 2 minutes later, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Different from her footsteps or Marcus's. Slower. Heavier. The sound of work boots on linoleum. Ethan appeared in the doorway carrying his backpack with the crayon drawings. He looked even more tired than yesterday, dark circles under his eyes like bruises. But his hands were steady as he set the backpack down on one of the chairs. "Morning," he said simply. "Thank you for coming," Vivian said. The words felt inadequate, but she didn't know what else to say. Ethan nodded and moved to the terminal, his fingers already reaching for the keyboard like he was coming home after a long trip. "You're Marcus Webb, right? Lead systems engineer?" Marcus straightened. "Yeah, we've never actually met." "No, but I've seen your work. The encryption protocols you designed for the civilian app are solid. Little redundant in the third layer, but solid." It was the kind of casual compliment that held weight, because it came from someone who actually understood the work. Marcus looked like he didn't know whether to be flattered or embarrassed. "I should have caught this," Marcus said. "The manual layer. I should have dug deeper into the legacy code." "You weren't supposed to catch it. That was the point." Ethan was already typing, and the screen was coming alive with code that Vivian didn't recognize. "A good safeguard is invisible until you need it, and you needed it, so here we are." The terminal displayed a login prompt that Vivian had never seen before. Manual layer access identity verification required. Ethan pulled a small USB drive from his pocket and plugged it into the terminal. The screen flickered, and suddenly, they were looking at something that predated every interface Vivian had seen in the Meridian system. It was basic, almost primitive, just lines of text on a black background. "This is the original Nexus framework," Ethan said quietly, "before any of the additions, before any of the updates. This is the skeleton that everything else hangs on." "Why keep it separate?" Marcus asked, leaning in to look. "Because systems evolve, they get bigger, more complex, more prone to failure, but the foundation has to stay stable, so I isolated it, made it independent of everything else. That way, if the superstructure collapses, the foundation survives." He typed a command, and the screen filled with diagnostic information that scrolled too fast for Vivian to follow. "Your update," Ethan said, pointing at one section of code, was trying to integrate new AI protocols into the decision-making layer. "See this right here? That's where it conflicts with the safety patch I installed in 2018. Marcus squinted at the screen. "What does the safety patch do?" "Prevents the AI from making autonomous decisions about physical security without human confirmation. Doors, locks, environmental controls, anything that could trap or harm people. Your update was trying to give the AI full autonomous control. My patch said no. So the system locked down to prevent the AI from taking over." Marcus looked impressed despite himself. "Exactly. And it flagged me for authentication because I'm the only one with override privileges on the manual layer. The system was basically asking, 'Is this what you want?' And since I wasn't here to answer, it went into hold mode." Vivian felt cold. What would have happened if we'd forced the update through? Ethan's fingers paused on the keyboard. Best case? The AI would have gotten confused by the conflicting protocols and crashed the whole system. Worst case? It would have started making decisions about building security without human oversight, locked people in rooms they couldn't get out of, disabled fire systems. Maybe worse. He looked at her. "I built the manual layer specifically to prevent that scenario." "Because you didn't trust the company," Vivian said. "Because I didn't trust the pressure the company was under. Nexus was dying. We all knew it. And when companies are dying, they make bad decisions. rush things, cut corners. Ethan went back to typing. I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I was trying to make sure that if someone tried to push the system past its limits, there'd be a break. Marcus pulled up a chair and sat down, watching the code scroll past. How long have you been maintaining this? 6 years? Every night shift, I'd come down here and check the diagnostics, make sure the foundation was stable, fix any stress fractures before they became problems. Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was describing routine maintenance instead of something that had kept a multi-billion-dollar system functioning. Nobody asked what I was doing, so I didn't tell them. We thought you were just mopping floors, Vivian said quietly. I was. That was part of the job too. He glanced at her. You know what's funny? I actually didn't mind it. The floors, the trash, the basic maintenance. It was simple, straightforward, and it left my brain free to think about the real work. He typed another command, and the countdown timer appeared on the screen. 7 hours, 12 minutes. Okay, Ethan said. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to authenticate the manual layer, which will give us access to the core protocols. Then we're going to modify your update to work around the safety patch instead of trying to override it. It'll take about 4 hours if everything goes smooth. And if it doesn't go smooth, Marcus asked, then we'll have 3 hours to figure out Plan B. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, and Vivian realized she was watching someone who'd been holding back for 6 years. All that skill, all that knowledge, compressed into night shifts and silence because he'd made a choice to prioritize something more important than his career. Can I ask you something? Vivian said. Ethan didn't stop typing. Sure. Why did you stay? After we acquired Nexus, after everything fell apart, why did you stay here? His fingers paused. For a moment, he just stared at the screen. Insurance, he said finally. Meridian's employee health coverage is the best in the industry. When Mia was diagnosed, I had specialists telling me she needed treatments that cost more than most people make in a year. Nexus was collapsing. I had offers from other companies, better positions, more money, but none of them had insurance that would cover what she needed. So you took the night maintenance job. I took the only job Meridian was offering to someone without a degree on paper. All my credentials were classified. I couldn't prove what I'd done, and I couldn't tell anyone about it, so I became a janitor. He started typing again. And it worked. Mia got her treatments. We made it through the worst of it. That's all that mattered. Marcus was staring at Ethan like he was seeing him for the first time. You gave up everything. I gave up a career. That's not everything. Ethan pulled up another screen of code. Marcus, I need you to look at this section. Tell me if your AI protocols can interface with this authentication structure without triggering a conflict. They fell into a rhythm after that. Ethan explaining, Marcus analyzing, both of them speaking a technical language that Vivian could barely follow. She sat back and watched them work. These two men who represented completely different philosophies of success. Marcus, who'd climbed the corporate ladder by being brilliant and ambitious and willing to sacrifice everything for the next promotion. Ethan, who'd stepped off the ladder entirely because something else mattered more. At 8:30, Marcus's phone started ringing. He ignored it the first 3 times, but on the 4th, he glanced at the screen and grimaced. It's the Pentagon liaison. I should probably... Take it, Ethan said without looking up. Tell them we'll have an update by noon. Marcus stepped out into the hallway, and Vivian could hear his voice through the doorway, calm and professional, explaining without explaining. You're good at this, Vivian said to Ethan. At what? Managing people. You just diffused Marcus's stress and gave him a script to handle the Pentagon in about 10 seconds. Ethan shrugged. I used to run a team of 40 engineers. You learn how to read people, figure out what they need to hear. You could have that again. After this, I could reinstate you, give you a position that actually matches your skills. His hand stopped moving. He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her feel small. Ms. Hart, I don't want a position. I don't want an office or a title or a place in your org chart. I want flexible Thursdays so I can take Mia to her cardiology appointments. I want insurance that covers her medications without pre-authorization battles every month. I want to leave at 7 a.m. and not think about this place until 11 p.m. when I come back. He turned back to the screen. You keep trying to fit me into your world because that's the only kind of success you understand. But I already have what I need. You're mopping floors. And you're working 90-hour weeks to impress people you don't like so you can make money you don't have time to spend. Which one of us is actually winning? The words hit harder than they should have. Vivian opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Marcus came back in, looking pale. The Pentagon wants a full briefing by 3 p.m. They're sending someone to campus. We'll be done by then, Ethan said calmly. How can you be sure? Because I built this, and I know exactly how long it takes to fix it. He pointed at the screen. See this? We're 30% through the integration. Another 2 hours and we'll have the update modified. 1 more hour to test it, 30 minutes to deploy. That leaves us 90 minutes of buffer before the deadline. Marcus sat down and pulled his laptop over, working in parallel with Ethan. Vivian watched the two of them, the young corporate engineer and the burned-out architect, finding a rhythm together. At 10:15, her phone rang. The board president. Vivian, what the hell is going on? I've got shareholders calling, reporters camped outside the building, and the Pentagon breathing down my neck. We had a system malfunction. We're fixing it. A malfunction? Our stock dropped 8% in pre-market trading. This is a catastrophe. No, it's a reminder that complex systems require respect and understanding. We got careless. We're correcting it. I want a full investigation into who's responsible for this disaster. Vivian looked at Ethan, his fingers moving steadily across the keyboard, completely focused on the work. I'm responsible, she said. I pushed for the update without understanding the full architecture. I ignored warnings from someone who knew better, and I'm fixing it. If the board wants my resignation, we can discuss that after we've resolved the immediate crisis. Silence on the other end. Then, we'll table that discussion for now. But Vivian, this can't happen again. It won't. She ended the call and found both Marcus and Ethan looking at her. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said. Yes, I did. It's the truth. At 11:47, Ethan leaned back in his chair and cracked his knuckles. Okay, integration's complete. Marcus, run your diagnostic suite on the modified protocols. Marcus's fingers flew across his keyboard. Lines of code scrolled past, green check marks appearing one after another. Clean, he said. No conflicts. The AI protocols are interfacing with your safety patch instead of trying to override it. Good. Now we test it in Sandbox before we deploy to the live system. They spent the next 40 minutes running simulations, throwing every scenario they could think of at the modified update. Each time, the system responded exactly as it should: secure, stable, safe. At 12:34 p.m., Ethan entered the final command. Manual layer. Authentication confirmed. EJC verified system integration. Approved deploying update. The screen filled with progress bars. In the control center upstairs, Vivian knew Marcus's team would be watching the same thing play out across their monitors. The countdown timer stopped at 0 hours, 4 minutes, 23 seconds, and 17 milliseconds. Then it disappeared. The red emergency lighting in the building shut off, replaced by normal fluorescence. Somewhere in the walls, Vivian heard the soft click of locks disengaging. Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it and grinned. Control center says all systems are green. Doors unlocked, temperature controls responding, security grid online. Everything's back. Ethan was already unplugging his USB drive and shutting down Terminal 7. Then we're done. Wait, that's it? Marcus looked almost disappointed. We should run extended diagnostics, verify system stability over the next 24 hours, document everything we did. You can do all that without me. The foundation is stable. Your update is integrated. The rest is just housekeeping. He picked up his backpack, and Vivian noticed for the first time that one of the crayon drawings was new. A stick figure with dark hair standing next to a smaller stick figure, both of them holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, "Daddy is the best." I need to go, Ethan said. Mia has school pickup at 3, and I promised her we'd stop for ice cream if she felt up to it. Vivian stood. Ethan, wait. We need to talk about your employment status, your position here. I'm good with things how they were. Night maintenance, building C, same hours, same pay. You can't be serious. After what you just did, Ms. Hart. He looked at her and his eyes were kind but firm. I don't need you to validate my worth. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I've built, and I know what I've chosen to prioritize. Those things don't change because you finally noticed I exist. At least let me adjust your compensation. Better insurance coverage for Mia, flexible scheduling for her appointments, Now that I'll take. Not because you owe me, but because it helps my daughter. Write it up and send it to my email. I'll look it over. He headed for the door, then paused and looked back at Marcus. Your encryption protocols really are good, but you're overthinking the third layer. Sometimes simple is better. Trust the math. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, fading into silence. Marcus and Vivian stood in the Terminal 7 room, surrounded by old equipment and forgotten technology, and listened to him leave. We really screwed up, Marcus said quietly. Yeah, we did. He could have destroyed us, could have let the system crash, let us tear ourselves apart trying to fix it, could have demanded anything he wanted. But he didn't. Vivian picked up one of the old keyboards, felt its weight. Because revenge wasn't the point. Proving himself wasn't the point. He just wanted to go home to his daughter. Marcus packed up his laptop. What are you going to tell the board? The truth. That we built an empire on a foundation we didn't understand, and we're damn lucky the architect was still around to keep it from collapsing. They walked back through Building C together, and Vivian found herself noticing things she'd never paid attention to before. The floors were spotless. The equipment was maintained. The old building had been quietly cared for by someone who understood what it meant. In the control center, the engineering team was celebrating, high-fiving, and laughing with the relief of people who'd just avoided disaster. They cheered when they saw Marcus, calling him a hero. No one mentioned Ethan, no one except Marcus, who climbed onto a desk and raised his voice above the noise. Hey, everyone shut up for a second. The room went quiet. We didn't save this. I didn't save this. The guy who saved it was Ethan Cole from Night Maintenance, who most of you probably never noticed because he worked while you were sleeping. He built the foundation this entire company runs on, and he fixed it this morning because we were too arrogant to listen when he tried to warn us. Marcus looked around the room. So before we start celebrating our own genius, maybe we should remember that the best work doesn't always happen in the spotlight. Sometimes it happens at night, in the basement, by people who don't care about credit. The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in, until the whole control center was applauding for someone who wasn't there to hear it. Vivian left them to their celebration and went back to her office. The board meeting was in 20 minutes, and she needed to figure out how to explain what had happened without sounding like she'd lost control of her own company. Except she had lost control. That was the point. She'd been so busy building and expanding and acquiring that she'd forgotten to understand what she already had. And it had almost cost her everything. At 2:47 p.m., her phone buzzed with an email from Ethan. The subject line was blank. The message was 3 sentences. System is stable. Modified update will hold. You know where to find me if you need me. No signature, no pleasantries. Just the information and the implicit promise that he'd be there if she needed him. Vivian stared at the email for a long time. Then she opened a new document and started writing the memo that would change Meridian's hiring practices, its approach to employee retention, and its fundamental understanding that worth wasn't always visible on a resume. She wrote about the danger of dismissing people based on titles instead of capabilities. She wrote about the arrogance of assuming expertise meant visibility. She wrote about a man who'd sacrificed everything that the corporate world valued and gained something that actually mattered. At 3 p.m., she walked into the board meeting and told them they'd been running their company on the back of a janitor who was smarter than all of them combined. Half of them thought she'd lost her mind. The other half started asking the right questions. And somewhere across town, Ethan Cole was picking up his daughter from school, holding her hand and asking her what flavor ice cream she wanted. The ice cream shop was called Betty's, a small place on Maple Street that had been there since before Ethan was born. The same cracked vinyl booths, the same faded photos of Sundays on the wall, the same bell that rang when you pushed open the door. Mia wanted chocolate chip cookie dough. She always wanted chocolate chip cookie dough. Ethan ordered it in a cup instead of a cone because her hands were shaking today, the tremor that came when her medication levels weren't quite right. She didn't complain, just took the cup and the plastic spoon and smiled at him like he'd given her the moon. They sat in their usual booth by the window, and Ethan watched her eat slowly, carefully, savoring each bite the way kids do when they've learned that good things don't last forever. Daddy, you look tired, Mia said around a mouthful of ice cream. Little bit. Had to go into work early today. Did you fix something? Yeah, baby, I fixed something. Was it important? Ethan thought about the control center, the countdown timer, Vivian Hart's face in his porch light. It was important to some people. Good. Mia took another bite. You're really good at fixing things. Where'd you learn that? Mrs. Patterson says so. She says you fixed the water fountain at school last month when nobody else could. Ethan smiled. He had fixed that fountain after picking Mia up one day and noticing it was broken. Took him 15 minutes with tools from his car. The principal had tried to give him a gift card to Starbucks, and he told her to put it toward classroom supplies instead. Mrs. Patterson talks too much, he said. She says you're special, that not everybody has a dad who can fix everything. Something twisted in Ethan's chest. I can't fix everything, sweetheart. Mia looked at him with those dark eyes that were too old for an 8-year-old. You fixed my heart monitor when it broke. You fixed the lock on our front door. You fixed my bike and my bookshelf and that broken step in the hallway. Those are things. Things are easy. What's hard? Ethan watched her eat her ice cream and didn't know how to explain that the hardest thing in the world was sitting across from your daughter in an ice cream shop, watching her enjoy something simple, and knowing that no amount of skill or knowledge or late nights at a terminal could fix what was wrong inside her chest. People, he said finally. People are hard to fix. Mia nodded like she understood, which maybe she did. Kids who spent half their lives in hospitals learned things other kids didn't. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus Webb. Got your number from HR. Just wanted to say thanks. And sorry for not seeing you before. Ethan stared at the message for a moment, then put his phone away without responding. He didn't need Marcus's gratitude or his guilt. He just needed to finish his ice cream with his daughter and get her home before she got too tired. But his phone kept buzzing. More messages, more numbers he didn't recognize. This is Jennifer from Systems. You probably don't know me, but I've been working with your code for 3 years and never knew it was yours. Thank you. Dave Chen, security team. Marcus told us what you did. Respect, man. Angela Martinez, data analysis. If you ever want to grab coffee and talk about the manual layer architecture, I'd love to learn from you. The messages kept coming, and Ethan finally turned his phone off completely. Is work bothering you? Mia asked. Yeah, they want to talk about what happened today. Are you in trouble? No, baby. Opposite of trouble, I think. Mia finished her ice cream and pushed the empty cup away. Can we go home? I'm sleepy. It was only 4:30, but Ethan could see the fatigue in her face, the way her shoulders slumped. Bad days took more out of her than they should. Yeah, let's go home. He helped her out of the booth, his hand on her back to steady her, and they walked to his car. A 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. He kept meaning to fix it, but time was always in short supply. The drive home took 12 minutes. Mia fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head against the window, and Ethan drove carefully to avoid waking her. When they pulled into the driveway, he carried her inside and laid her on the couch, pulling the blanket over her and making sure her monitor was in reach. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the beep of Mia's medical equipment. Ethan stood in the kitchen, drinking water from a glass with cartoon characters on it, and felt the exhaustion catch up to him. He'd been awake for 26 hours. But sleep would have to wait. He had laundry to do, dishes to wash, dinner to prep for when Mia woke up. The machinery of their small life that kept running because he made it run. His phone turned itself back on. He must have held the button too long, and immediately started buzzing with notifications. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, 6 voicemails. He ignored all of it and opened the email app to send a quick message to Mia's teacher about tomorrow's pickup time. But the first email in his inbox stopped him cold. From Vivian Hart. Subject, proposal. Time, 4:47 p.m. Ethan, I'm attaching a revised employment contract for your review. Key changes. Flexible scheduling for all medical appointments, not just Thursdays. Premium health insurance tier with 0 pre-authorization requirements. 40% salary increase. Title change to Senior Systems Architect. You can decline the title if you want, but the pay grade comes with it. Option to work remotely 3 days per week. This isn't charity and it's not guilt. You're worth this, and we should have recognized it 6 years ago. Also attaching documentation for a revision to our hiring and retention practices. I'd like your input if you're willing to give it. VH. Ethan sat down at the kitchen table and read the email 3 times. The salary increase alone would cover Mia's medications for a year. The insurance change would eliminate the monthly fights with the benefits department about coverage. The flexible scheduling meant he could actually take her to every appointment without burning through his limited PTO. It was everything he needed, and he didn't trust it. He'd seen this before back at Nexus. The sudden recognition after a crisis, the promises of change, the commitments that lasted until the next quarterly review when budget concerns took priority again. But he opened the attachment anyway. The contract was real, detailed, written in language that actually protected the employee instead of just the company. Someone had put serious thought into this, probably spent hours with the legal team making sure every clause meant what it said. The second attachment was a 15-page memo outlining new policies for employee evaluation, skills assessment, and internal mobility. Ethan skimmed it and felt something strange in his chest. Vivian Hart was actually trying. His phone rang. Marcus Webb. Ethan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hey," Marcus said. "Did I catch you at a bad time?" "My daughter's sleeping. What do you need?" "Nothing. Marcus paused. "I've been thinking about what you said, about who's winning, and I realized I don't actually know what I'm working for anymore. I mean, I know the job, I know the projects, but I couldn't tell you why it matters." Ethan looked at Mia on the couch, her chest rising and falling steadily. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you know you've got it figured out, and I'm 34 years old with a master's from MIT and a 6-figure salary, and I don't have a single thing in my life that matters the way your daughter matters to you." "That's not my problem to solve, Marcus." "I know. I'm not asking you to solve it. I just wanted to say that watching you today, the way you handled everything, the way you stayed calm and focused and then just left to go pick up your kid, that's the first time in years I've seen someone actually live their priorities instead of just talking about them." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. "Anyway," Marcus continued, "I'm looking at the code you wrote. The manual layer, the fail-safes, the whole architecture. It's beautiful, man, like genuinely elegant. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to teach me, not as your boss or your colleague, just as someone who wants to learn from someone better." "I'm a janitor, Marcus. You're the guy who built the thing I've been working on for 3 years without understanding. That makes you the teacher and me the student, regardless of what our business cards say." Mia stirred on the couch, making a small sound. Ethan watched her settle back into sleep. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's all I'm asking. Thanks for picking up." Marcus hung up, and Ethan sat in his kitchen with the phone in his hand, wondering what had just happened to his carefully controlled life. The next morning, Ethan was back in Building C at 11 p.m., mopping the floors like always. But when he went down to Terminal 7 to run his routine diagnostics, he found someone already there. Jennifer Chen from Systems, sitting at one of the old terminals with her laptop open. "Sorry," she said when she saw him. "Marcus said it was okay if I worked down here sometimes. I can leave if you need the space." Ethan set his mop bucket down. "What are you working on?" "Trying to understand the interaction between your safety protocols and our new encryption layer. I keep hitting a wall, and I thought maybe if I looked at it from down here, where you built it, something would click." She looked nervous, like she expected him to throw her out. Instead, Ethan pulled up a chair and looked at her screen. "Show me where you're stuck." They worked for an hour. Ethan explained the architecture, the reasoning behind certain decisions, the trade-offs he'd made 7 years ago that still rippled through the system. Jennifer asked good questions, took notes, and didn't treat him like a janitor who'd gotten lucky. When he finally went back to his mopping, she called after him. "Ethan, thank you for this and for not letting the system crash. I know nobody really said it properly, but a lot of us would have lost our jobs if that had gone wrong. So, thank you." He nodded and went back to work. Over the next week, it kept happening, engineers appearing in Building C during his shift, asking questions, wanting to understand. At first, Ethan tried to discourage it. He had work to do, floors to clean, systems to maintain, but they kept coming back. Marcus showed up 3 times, always with coffee, and always with questions that showed he'd been studying the code on his own time. Angela Martinez brought her entire team down one night to walk through a data routing problem. Dave Chen asked for help understanding the security protocols. Ethan found himself teaching without meaning to, explaining things while he mopped, sketching diagrams on napkins during his dinner break, pulling up code on Terminal 7 to show people why certain approaches worked better than others. And slowly, something shifted in Building C. The engineers started staying longer, working later because they wanted to catch Ethan during his shift. They brought their hard problems, their stuck projects, their half-formed ideas. And Ethan, despite himself, got pulled in. Not because he wanted recognition or credit, but because he couldn't stand to see good people struggling with problems he could solve. On Thursday morning, Ethan left work at 7 a.m. like always and drove straight to Children's Hospital for Mia's cardiology appointment. The waiting room was full of tired parents and sick kids, the usual crowd of people who'd learned to measure time in appointments instead of days. Dr. Sarah Reeves was Mia's cardiologist, a woman in her 50s who'd been treating Mia since the diagnosis 3 years ago. She was blunt, thorough, and didn't sugarcoat things, which Ethan appreciated. "How's she been?" Dr. Reeves asked after examining Mia and sending her out to the play area with a nurse. "Tired more easily, the tremors are more frequent. Yesterday she almost passed out getting out of bed." Dr. Reeves pulled up Mia's chart on her computer, and Ethan could see the concern in her face. "Her heart function is declining faster than we projected. We're going to need to move up the timeline for surgery." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "How soon?" 6 months. "Maybe less if the deterioration continues at this rate." She looked at him. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Is there anything else we can try? Different medications, different treatments?" "We've exhausted the conservative options, Ethan. She needs the surgery. And she needs it from one of maybe 3 surgeons in the country who specialize in this particular defect." "What's the cost?" "With your current insurance? About $40,000 out of pocket. Without insurance, closer to $300,000. Ethan did the math in his head. His savings account had $8,000. His credit cards were maxed from the last hospitalization. His car was worth maybe $4,000 if he sold it. "I'll figure it out," he said. "There are programs, foundations that help with. I'll figure it out." Dr. Reeves looked at him for a long moment. "You're a good father, Ethan, but you can't do this alone. I've been doing it alone for 3 years. That doesn't mean you should have to keep doing it." But Ethan had learned a long time ago that should and reality were different things. He thanked Dr. Reeves, collected Mia from the play area, and drove home. Mia was quiet in the passenger seat, staring out the window. "Daddy, am I going to need the big surgery soon?" "Probably, baby." "Will it fix me?" "It'll help your heart work better. But I'll still be sick after." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You'll be stronger. You'll be able to do more things." "Like ride my bike without getting tired?" "Yeah, like that." Mia nodded and went back to looking out the window. She didn't cry or complain or ask why this was happening to her. She just accepted it the way she'd learned to accept everything else. That afternoon, while Mia napped, Ethan opened his laptop and looked at Vivian's contract offer. The salary increase would help. The insurance change would eliminate some of the out-of-pocket costs. But even with all of that, he was still short. He started researching medical loans, payment plans, fundraising platforms. All of it felt like building a house of cards in a windstorm. His phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Ethan." "Mr. Cole, this is Patricia Wong from the Meridian HR department. I'm calling about your employment contract." "I haven't signed it yet." "I understand. But I wanted to let you know that Ms. Hart has authorized an additional benefit package that wasn't in the original contract. A signing bonus of $60,000 paid immediately upon acceptance." Ethan sat up. "What?" "She's also established a medical emergency fund for employees with dependents who have serious health conditions. You'd be eligible for up to $50,000 in additional assistance for qualifying medical expenses." "Why would she do that?" "I think you'd have to ask her that yourself, Mr. Cole. But the offer is legitimate. If you'd like to accept, I can process the paperwork today." After she hung up, Ethan sat in his kitchen and stared at the contract on his screen. $110,000. Enough to cover Mia's surgery with room to spare. It felt like a trap. Like accepting would mean owing something he couldn't repay. But then he thought about Mia, about the way her hands shook, about the fear in her eyes when she asked if the surgery would fix her. He signed the contract. 10 minutes later, his phone rang again. Vivian Hart. "You signed it," she said without preamble. "Yeah. Good. HR will have everything processed by end of day tomorrow. The signing bonus will hit your account within 48 hours. "Why did you do this?" Vivian was quiet for a moment. "Because I spent 6 years profiting from your work without even knowing you existed. Because you saved my company and asked for nothing in return. Because your daughter deserves a father who doesn't have to choose between her health and his pride." "This isn't about pride." "I know. That's why I did it." She paused. "There's one more thing. I'd like you to meet with our HR director next week to discuss a transition plan. We want to move you into a position that actually uses your skills." "I told you I don't want an office job." "I know. But what if we created something different? A hybrid role where you maintain the legacy systems, mentor junior engineers, and work whatever hours fit your schedule? You could still do it at night if that works better for Mia." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "I don't know, Vivian. You don't have to decide now. Just meet with HR. Talk it through. See if we can build something that works for you instead of asking you to fit into something we've already built." After she hung up, Ethan walked into the living room and sat on the floor next to the couch where Mia was sleeping. He watched her breathe, counted each rise and fall of her chest, and let himself imagine a future where she was strong enough to ride her bike without stopping to catch her breath. That night at work, Ethan found something unexpected in Building C. Someone had set up a proper workspace near Terminal 7, a decent office chair instead of the torn one he'd been using, a new monitor, a small refrigerator stocked with water and energy drinks, a note taped to the terminal. For the architect. From the people who finally noticed. The Building C night crew. Ethan stood there looking at it, feeling something crack in his chest. He'd spent 6 years invisible, and now suddenly everyone wanted to see him. He didn't know if he liked it. But when Marcus showed up an hour later with questions about system architecture, Ethan pulled up a chair and started teaching. And when Jennifer appeared after that with her team, wanting to understand the encryption protocols, Ethan walked them through it. And when Angela came down with coffee and a problem about data routing that had her team stuck for 3 days, Ethan solved it in 20 minutes and showed her why the solution worked. By 3 a.m., there were 8 people in Building C, all gathered around Terminal 7, all learning from a janitor who'd been there the whole time. Marcus looked around at the group and laughed. "This is insane. We're having an engineering summit in a basement at 3 in the morning. "Best time for it," Ethan said. "No interruptions." "We should make this official, like a regular thing. Weekly sessions where people can bring their hard problems and work through them together." "I'm not running classes, Marcus." "Not classes, just collaborative problem solving, with you as the anchor because you understand the foundation better than anyone." Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to keep his head down, do his work, go home to Mia. But he looked at the faces around Terminal 7, smart people, good people, trying to build something that mattered, and he couldn't quite make himself shut them down. "One night a week," he said finally. "Wednesdays, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. You bring the problems, I'll help where I can, but this doesn't interfere with my regular work, and if Mia needs me, I'm gone." "Deal," Marcus said immediately. The others nodded, already pulling out phones to put it in their calendars. Ethan went back to his mopping, and the engineers went back to their projects. But something had changed in Building C. It felt less like a forgotten basement and more like a place where real work happened. At 6:30 a.m., Ethan was finishing his last round of diagnostics when his phone buzzed. A text from Mia's school. Reminder, parent-teacher conference Friday at 3 p.m. He'd completely forgotten about it. Ethan pulled up his calendar and realized Friday was also the day HR wanted to meet about the new position, and the day the Pentagon liaison was scheduled to visit campus for a facility review, and the day Marcus had asked him to consult on a security protocol that was giving the team problems. His carefully controlled schedule was falling apart. He sent a text to Vivian. "Can we reschedule the HR meeting? Mia's school conference is Friday." Her response came back in 30 seconds. "Move the meeting to you. What time works?" "After 5 p.m., done. I'll have HR come to your house if that's easier." Ethan stared at his phone. A CEO offering to send HR to his house for a meeting. Nothing made sense anymore. He drove home, picked up Mia for school, and spent the morning trying to sleep, but mostly just lying in bed thinking about surgical costs and contract negotiations and the 8 people who'd shown up in Building C to learn from him. When his alarm went off at 2 p.m., he felt worse than when he'd laid down. But he got up anyway, because that's what you did when you had a daughter who needed you. He picked Mia up from school at 3, took her home, made her a snack, and helped her with her homework. Normal afternoon routine. Normal life. Except his phone kept buzzing with messages from people at Meridian. Questions about code. Requests for consultations. Invitations to meetings. Ethan ignored most of it and focused on Mia's math worksheet, helping her work through multiplication problems with the patience of someone who'd explained complex algorithms to government engineers. At 4:30, there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find Vivian Hart standing on his porch with a leather folder and an uncertain expression. "You said after 5, Ethan said. "I know, I'm early. Is that okay?" He hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Vivian walked into his small living room and looked around like she was seeing something from another planet. The worn furniture, the medical equipment, the crayon drawings taped to every available surface, the stack of hospital bills on the kitchen counter. Mia looked up from her homework at the kitchen table. "Who are you?" she asked, with the bluntness of 8-year-olds. "I'm Vivian. I work with your dad." "Are you his boss?" "Sort of." Mia looked at Ethan. "She doesn't look like a janitor." Vivian's eyebrows went up, and Ethan fought the urge to laugh. "Ms. Hart runs the whole company, baby. She just wants to talk to me about work stuff. Can you finish your homework in your room for a bit?" Mia gathered her papers and headed down the hallway, but not before giving Vivian one more suspicious look. When she was gone, Vivian sat on the couch and opened her folder. "She's beautiful," she said quietly. "Yeah. How's she doing, health-wise?" "We're managing." Vivian nodded and pulled out a stack of papers. "I brought the transition plan for you to review, but before we get into that, I need to say something." Ethan sat in the chair across from her and waited. "I've been thinking about what you said, about who's winning, and I realized you were right. I've spent 10 years building a company, and I don't have a single relationship that isn't transactional. No family, no real friends, just people who want something from me or people I pay to do things." She looked down at the papers in her lap. "And then I met you, and I saw what it looks like when someone actually knows what they're living for. And it made me realize I don't have that." "Vivian, I'm not asking for advice or sympathy. I'm just explaining why I've been pushing so hard to fix things with you. It's not guilt, and it's not charity. It's me trying to figure out if there's a way to build a company that doesn't require people to sacrifice everything that matters." Ethan looked at this woman who controlled a billion-dollar empire, sitting in his living room looking lost. "You can't fix me," he said, "or use me as some kind of proof that you're doing things right." "I know. And you can't build your redemption arc on my back." "I know that too." Vivian met his eyes. "But I can try to build something better. And I can ask you to help me do it, not because you owe me anything, but because you're the only person I know who actually understands what better means." Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to keep his distance, take the money, help Mia, and stay invisible. But he looked at the papers in Vivian's hands and thought about all those engineers in Building C, trying to learn, trying to build something that mattered. "Show me the plan," he said. They spent 2 hours going through it, a new role that didn't exist in any org chart, built specifically around Ethan's constraints and capabilities. Legacy system architect with flexible hours, remote work options, and the authority to shut down any project that threatened the foundational stability. It was everything he had told her he didn't want, and it was also exactly what Meridian needed. "I'll try it for 6 months," Ethan said finally. "But if it interferes with Mia, I walk. No negotiation, no guilt, just done." Agreed. They shook hands and Vivian stood to leave. At the door, she paused. "Ethan, thank you for giving this a chance and for teaching me that success doesn't have to look the way I thought it did." After she left, Ethan stood in his small house and wondered what he'd just agreed to. Mia appeared from her room. "Is she nice?" she asked. "I think she's trying to be." "Good. You deserve to work with nice people." Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug and held her tight, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, irregular but steady. Whatever happened next with Meridian, this was what mattered. This was what he'd fight for. Everything else was just details. The signing bonus hit Ethan's bank account on a Tuesday morning while he was making Mia breakfast. His phone buzzed with the notification, and he had to read the number 3 times before it felt real. $60,000. More money than he'd seen in one place since before his wife died. Mia was at the table drawing pictures of cats. She'd been on a cat phase for 2 weeks now, and didn't notice when Ethan had to sit down because his legs went weak. "Daddy, you okay?"
"Yeah, baby. Just tired."
But he wasn't tired. He was terrified, because now the surgery was possible, really possible. Not some distant thing he was scrambling to figure out, but an actual event that would happen, that he could schedule, that would either fix Mia's heart or destroy what little time they had left together. Dr. Reeves had given him the names of 3 surgeons, one in Boston, one in Philadelphia, one in Los Angeles. All of them booked months in advance, all of them expensive even with insurance, all of them with success rates that were good but not guaranteed. Nothing was ever guaranteed. Ethan called the Boston hospital first from his car after dropping Mia at school. The scheduler was efficient and impersonal, the voice of someone who dealt with desperate parents every day. Dr. Morrison's next available consultation is in 6 weeks. Surgery scheduling would be after that, probably another 8 to 12 weeks depending on the case complexity. "My daughter doesn't have that long. Her cardiologist says 6 months, maybe less." "I understand, Mr. Cole. Let me check the urgent cases list." Keyboard sounds. "I can get you a consultation in 3 weeks if you're willing to come in on short notice. After that, if Dr. Morrison accepts the case, we might be able to expedite to within a month." 4 weeks total. Maybe 5. "I'll take it." He scheduled the consultation and sat in the school parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to breathe normally. That night at Meridian, everything felt different. Ethan's new contract had gone into effect, which meant he technically wasn't maintenance anymore. But he'd insisted on keeping the same hours, the same routine, the same access to Building C. The only real change was his pay grade and the desk that had appeared in the corner of the Terminal 7 room. An actual desk, with a nameplate that said E. Cole Legacy Systems Architecture. He tried to get them to remove the nameplate, but Marcus had installed it personally and refused to take it back down. "You earned it," Marcus had said. "Stop being weird about it." The Wednesday night sessions had grown. What started as 8 people was now 23, with engineers from every department showing up to work through problems. Ethan had stopped trying to control it and just let it happen. Tonight, Angela Martinez brought a crisis. "The new data routing protocol is creating bottlenecks in the legacy layer," she said, pulling up code on the main monitor. "Every time we try to push high-volume traffic through, the system throttles back. We can't figure out why." Ethan looked at the code for maybe 30 seconds. "You're hitting the safety buffer I built into the original architecture. It's designed to prevent data floods from overwhelming the physical servers. Can we disable it?" "You could, but then you'd risk actual hardware damage during peak load. The throttling isn't a bug, it's protection." Marcus leaned over Ethan's shoulder, studying the screen. "So we need to redesign the routing to work within the buffer limits instead of trying to exceed them. Or upgrade your server capacity so the buffer limits are higher. But that's a hardware solution, not a software fix." Angela groaned. "Hardware upgrades take months to approve and implement. Then you redesign the routing." Ethan pulled up a blank screen and started typing. "Look, if you partition the traffic into smaller streams and route them through parallel pathways instead of one main channel, you stay under the buffer threshold and actually get better throughput." He sketched out the approach in code, and Angela's eyes went wide. "That's brilliant. Why didn't we think of that?" "Because you were trying to force the system to do what you wanted instead of understanding what it was designed to do." Marcus laughed. "That should be Meridian's new motto, finally understanding what we built." The group worked until 2 a.m., implementing Angela's routing fix and testing it against the legacy buffer. It worked perfectly. And Angela looked at Ethan like he'd performed a miracle. "You just saved our team 3 months of work," she said. "I just showed you how to read the system you're already using. You'll figure out the rest." After everyone left, Ethan ran his usual diagnostics and found something odd in the logs. A small anomaly in the security protocols, nothing critical but not normal either. He flagged it for follow-up and made a note to check again tomorrow. At 7 a.m., he left Building C and drove straight to Children's Hospital for Mia's weekly blood work. She hated the needles, always had, but she was getting better at staying still while they drew the samples. "You're very brave," the phlebotomist said, putting a dinosaur sticker on Mia's shirt. "I have to be," Mia said simply. "Daddy says being scared is okay, but giving up isn't." Ethan felt something break inside his chest. In the car afterward, Mia was quiet for a long time. "Daddy, when I have the big surgery, will you be there when I wake up?" "I'll be there the whole time, baby, from when you fall asleep to when you wake up and every second in between. Promise?" "Promise." She nodded and went back to looking out the window, trusting him completely because she didn't know yet that some promises were impossible to keep. That afternoon, Vivian called while Ethan was helping Mia with her homework. "I need you to come in during the day tomorrow. Pentagon review at 10 a.m. and they want to meet the person who stabilized the system." "I told you I don't do daytime meetings." "I know, but this is important. They're deciding whether to renew our defense contracts, and they specifically asked about the foundational architecture. You're the only one who can speak to it credibly." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "How long?" 2 hours, maybe 3. "Mia has school until 3. I need to be there for pickup." "I'll have a car waiting to get you there on time." "Please, Ethan. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical." He wanted to say no, wanted to keep his boundaries clear and his life separate. But he thought about the signing bonus, about the surgery, about the fact that Vivian had actually followed through on everything she'd promised. "Fine, but I'm gone at 2:30, no matter what's happening." Deal. The next morning, Ethan dropped Mia at school and drove to Meridian feeling wrong. He'd never been on campus during the day, and walking through the lobby in sunlight felt like visiting a parallel universe. Security gave him a visitor badge before recognizing him. "Oh, Mr. Cole, sorry, sir. You don't need. We can get you a proper employee badge now that you're." "Visitor badge is fine." He took the elevator to the executive floor, where Vivian met him outside the conference room. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't your preference. Let's just get it done." The conference room was full of people in military uniforms and government suits, all looking at Ethan like they were trying to figure out if he was the janitor or someone important. Vivian made the introductions. "This is Ethan Cole, our legacy systems architect. He designed the foundational AI framework that all our defense applications run on." Colonel Patricia Warren, the lead Pentagon liaison, looked Ethan up and down. He was wearing jeans and his usual zip-up hoodie because he'd been up all night and hadn't thought to dress differently. "Mr. Cole, we've been reviewing the incident from 2 weeks ago, the system lockdown. It wasn't an incident. It was a designed safety response to prevent catastrophic failure. A safety response that locked down a classified facility and nearly cost this company its contracts. A safety response that prevented an AI system from making autonomous decisions about physical security without human oversight, which is exactly what it was designed to do." Colonel Warren's eyes narrowed. "You're saying the lockdown was intentional?" "I'm saying the manual layer did exactly what I built it to do. The company tried to push the system past its tolerances, and the system pushed back. That's not a failure. That's good engineering." One of the other Pentagon reps, a younger man with major's insignia, leaned forward. "But you built in a single point of failure. If you hadn't been available to authenticate, the entire system would have crashed." "No. If I hadn't been available, the system would have reverted to safe mode and maintained core functions indefinitely. The 14-hour countdown was to encourage someone to actually call me and ask for help instead of trying to hack through the safeguard, which is what happened." Marcus, sitting at the far end of the table, spoke up. "The manual layer is actually brilliant from a security standpoint. It requires human judgment at critical decision points, which prevents both AI autonomy failures and external hack attempts. You can't compromise what you can't access without the right person." Colonel Warren looked at Vivian. "And this person was working as a maintenance employee when the crisis occurred?" "An oversight on our part that we've corrected," Vivian said smoothly. "Mr. Cole's expertise was underutilized due to gaps in our personnel evaluation process. We've since restructured to ensure that doesn't happen again." "Underutilized," the colonel repeated. "That's an interesting way to describe having your lead architect mopping floors." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "I chose that position because it gave me the schedule flexibility I needed for my daughter's medical care. Nobody forced me into it. And now? Now I have the same schedule flexibility with a role that actually uses my skills. Best of both worlds." The colonel studied him for a long moment. Walk me through the manual layer architecture. I want to understand how it works. Ethan spent the next 90 minutes explaining the system he'd built, fielding technical questions, demonstrating protocols on the conference room monitors. The Pentagon reps were sharp, asking questions that showed they actually understood the technology. Colonel Warren seemed particularly interested in the fail-safes. So theoretically, this architecture could be adapted for other high-security systems, military installations, communications networks, critical infrastructure. Theoretically, yes, but it would need to be customized for each application. The manual layer isn't one size fits all. Would you be willing to consult on those adaptations? Ethan glanced at Vivian, who looked like she was trying not to smile. Depends on the timeline and the requirements. I have constraints that aren't negotiable. Your daughter. Yes. Colonel Warren nodded. I have 3 kids myself. I understand constraints. She closed her folder. Ms. Hart, based on what we've seen today, I'm recommending contract renewal with an expansion clause. We'd like Meridian to develop manual layer adaptations for 3 classified projects, with Mr. Cole as the lead consulting architect. Vivian's face remained professionally neutral, but Ethan could see the relief in her eyes. We'd be honored, Colonel. After the Pentagon reps left, Vivian grabbed Ethan's arm before he could escape. That was incredible. You just secured our biggest contract expansion in 5 years. I just explained how the system works. You made them trust us again. That's worth more than any technical demonstration. She paused. The consulting role they mentioned, we can structure it however you need. Remote work, flexible hours, everything. I told you I'd think about it. I know. I'm just saying the door is open. Ethan checked his watch. 2:50. I need to go get Mia. The car's waiting downstairs. True to her word, there was a town car with a driver ready to take him to Mia's school. Ethan felt ridiculous climbing into the back of a luxury sedan in his hoodie and work boots, but he made it to the school with 10 minutes to spare. Mia came out with her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who wanted to talk. Mr. Cole, I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to let you know that Mia's been struggling a bit in class lately. She seems more tired than usual, has trouble focusing. Her heart condition is progressing. We're scheduling surgery soon. Mrs. Patterson's face softened. Is there anything we can do to help? Modified assignments? Extra support? Just patience. She's doing the best she can. She's a wonderful child. So kind to the other students, always trying even when she doesn't feel well. Mrs. Patterson hesitated. If there's anything you need, help with transportation, meal deliveries during recovery, anything, the school community wants to support you. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Thank you. We're managing, but I'll let you know. In the car, Mia leaned against him and fell asleep within 5 minutes. She was exhausted from a normal school day, and it scared him. That night, he called Dr. Morrison's office in Boston and moved the consultation up by a week, claiming an emergency. They gave him an appointment for the following Tuesday. He didn't tell Mia yet. Didn't want to worry her until he knew more. At work that Wednesday, the anomaly in the security logs had grown. Still not critical, but persistent. Ethan spent 3 hours tracing it and found something that made his blood run cold. Someone was probing the manual layer. Not obviously, not with brute force attacks or obvious hacking attempts. Just gentle, persistent queries from an internal IP address, testing the boundaries of the authentication protocols. Ethan pulled up the access records and found the source. A workstation in Building D, registered to someone named David Pearson in the data analysis department. He'd never heard of David Pearson. Ethan called Marcus immediately. Do we have a David Pearson in data analysis? Yeah, junior analyst. Been here about 8 months. Wepo. Because he's been poking at the manual layer for the last week, and I want to know why. Marcus's voice went tight. That's not part of any authorized project. I know, which is why I'm asking you to look into it before I escalate. Give me an hour. 45 minutes later, Marcus appeared in Building C with a laptop and a grim expression. Pearson's workstation has been running unauthorized queries against the core system, not just the manual layer. He's been mapping the entire architecture. For what purpose? That's the question. I pulled his hire records. His background check was clean, references were solid, but something feels off. Ethan looked at the query logs on his screen. These aren't the questions of someone trying to understand the system. These are reconnaissance patterns. He's looking for vulnerabilities. Corporate espionage? Maybe. Or something worse. Ethan saved the logs and locked down the manual layer with additional authentication requirements. We need to tell Vivian. They found her in her office at midnight, still working. When Marcus explained what they'd found, her face went pale. How much access did he have? Limited, Ethan said. He never got past the outer authentication layers, but he was systematic about it. Whoever he is, he knows what he's doing. Vivian picked up her phone. I'm calling security. We need to lock down his access immediately and bring him in for questioning. Do it quietly, Ethan said. If he's working with someone, we don't want to spook them. Security detained David Pearson at his home at 2 a.m. By 4 a.m., he'd admitted to being paid by a competitor to map Meridian's core architecture. By 6 a.m., the FBI was involved. Ethan gave his statement to federal agents while the sun came up, explained the manual layer architecture, described the probe patterns. The agents were thorough and professional, and they told him the investigation would take weeks. We'll need you to testify if this goes to trial, one agent said. I have a daughter with a serious medical condition. I can't commit to long-term availability. We'll work around your schedule, Mr. Cole, but your testimony will be critical. You're the only one who can speak authoritatively about what was targeted and why it matters. Ethan left Meridian at 7:30, exhausted and wired, and went to pick up Mia. She took one look at him and frowned. Daddy, you look terrible. Bad night at work, baby. Did you fix it? Yeah, we fixed it. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening, that the probe of the manual layer was just the beginning of something he didn't fully understand yet. That weekend, Ethan and Mia drove to Boston for the consultation with Dr. Morrison. The hospital was huge and intimidating, all white walls and hushed voices and the smell of antiseptic. Mia held his hand so tight her knuckles went white. Dr. Morrison was a woman in her 60s with steady hands and kind eyes. She examined Mia thoroughly, reviewed all her medical records, and asked questions that showed she actually understood the complexity of the case. Then she sat down across from Ethan and Mia and folded her hands on her desk. Mia's condition is serious but operable. The surgery will be complex, probably 8 to 10 hours, and the recovery will be difficult. But if everything goes well, she should have significantly improved heart function. If everything goes well, Ethan repeated. There are always risks. I won't lie to you about that. But I've done this procedure 47 times, and my success rate is 89%. 89%. 11% chance his daughter died on the operating table. When can you schedule it? Ethan heard himself ask. I have an opening in 4 weeks. Given her deteriorating condition, I'd recommend we take it. 4 weeks. 28 days. Less than a month to prepare for the possibility of losing the only person in the world who mattered. We'll take it, Ethan said. Dr. Morrison nodded and started explaining the pre-op requirements, the recovery timeline, the follow-up care. Ethan tried to focus, tried to remember everything she was saying, but all he could think about was 11%. On the drive back home, Mia was quiet until they were almost there. Daddy, am I going to die? Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, baby. Dr. Morrison is going to fix your heart. But you're scared. I can tell. I'm scared because I love you. But Dr. Morrison is the best, and she's going to take good care of you. Will it hurt? You'll be asleep. You won't feel anything. What about after? After will be hard, but we'll get through it together. Mia nodded and went back to looking out the window, trusting him to make this okay even though he had no idea if he could. That night at work, Ethan couldn't focus. The diagnostics blurred on his screen, the code didn't make sense, and he kept thinking about surgery and percentages and the feel of Mia's hand in his. Marcus found him sitting at Terminal 7, staring at nothing. You okay, man? Mia's surgery is scheduled 4 weeks from today. Marcus sat down. That's good news, right? That they can do it so soon? It's terrifying news, but yeah, it's good. What can we do? The team, I mean. How can we help? You can't. This is something I have to do alone. Bullshit. You've been doing everything alone for 6 years. Let people help. Ethan looked at him. Why do you care? A month ago, you didn't even know I existed. A month ago, I was an arrogant idiot who thought job titles meant something. You changed that. You showed me what actually matters. Marcus leaned forward. Let us help. However you need. Coverage for your shifts, meal deliveries, hospital visits, whatever. You've been carrying this by yourself for too long. Ethan wanted to argue. Wanted to say he didn't need help, didn't want charity, could handle it himself. But he was so tired. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, Marcus smiled. Good. I'll talk to the team. We'll figure something out. Over the next week, Meridian did something Ethan had never seen a corporation do. They rallied. Angela started a meal train, coordinating people to bring food to Ethan's house every night so he didn't have to cook. Jennifer organized coverage for his shifts so he could take time off without losing pay. Dave Chen arranged transportation to and from the hospital for the surgery day. Vivian quietly increased Mia's medical benefits to cover everything, every cost, every fee, every possibility, so that Ethan didn't have to think about money while his daughter was in surgery. The Wednesday night group moved their session to Ethan's house, working quietly at his kitchen table while Mia slept on the couch, so he could be home and still help them with their problems. It was overwhelming and uncomfortable and completely foreign to everything Ethan had known for the last 6 years. But it was also the first time since his wife died that he didn't feel completely alone. 3 days before the surgery, Vivian asked Ethan to come to her office. He walked in to find her standing at her window, looking out at the Meridian campus. I've been thinking about what you said, about who's winning, and I realized you were teaching me something I needed to learn. I wasn't trying to teach you anything. I know. That's what made it real. She turned to face him. I'm restructuring the company, making changes to how we evaluate people, how we promote, how we measure success. And I wanted you to know that it's because of you. Vivian, let me finish. I spent 10 years building an empire and losing myself in the process. And then I met a janitor who turned out to be the smartest person in the building, and he taught me that the things I'd been chasing don't actually matter. So I'm changing it, the whole company culture, because if Meridian can miss someone like you for 6 years, we're doing everything wrong. Ethan didn't know what to say. Thank you, Vivian said quietly, for saving the company, for teaching me what matters, for letting us help you when you needed it. I haven't let you help me. You all just kind of forced it. She smiled. True, but you didn't push us away, which for you is basically the same thing. The day before the surgery, Ethan didn't go to work. He stayed home with Mia, playing games and reading books, and trying not to think about tomorrow. She fell asleep early, exhausted from the stress she wouldn't talk about, and Ethan sat on the couch watching her breathe. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. We're all thinking about you. Mia's going to be fine, and you're not alone in this. Then another from Angela. Everything's going to be okay. We've got your back. Then Jennifer, Dave, Vivian, and a dozen others, all sending the same message in different words. You're not alone. Ethan sat in his quiet house, surrounded by crayon drawings and medical equipment and messages from people who'd become something like friends, and let himself believe it might be true. The hospital required them to arrive at 5:30 in the morning. Ethan hadn't slept, had just laid in bed listening to Mia breathe in the room next to his, counting each sound like he was memorizing them. Mia was quiet in the car, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had been her mother's. She'd named it Cloudhopper when she was 4, and it went everywhere she went. Can Cloudhopper come into surgery with me? She asked. I'll ask the nurses. They might let you hold him until you fall asleep. Will you really be there when I wake up? I promised, didn't I? She nodded and went back to staring out the window at the dark streets of Boston. The city was just waking up, delivery trucks making their rounds, a few early commuters heading to work. Normal people doing normal things while Ethan's world balanced on the edge of an 11% chance. At the hospital, they were taken to a pre-op room where nurses moved with efficient kindness, checking Mia's vitals, explaining procedures in child-friendly language, putting an IV in her small arm. She didn't cry, just bit her lip and squeezed Ethan's hand hard enough to hurt. Dr. Morrison came in at 7:15, already in her surgical scrubs. How are we doing, Mia? Scared. That's honest. I like honest. Want to know a secret? Mia nodded. I get a little scared before every surgery, too. It means I'm paying attention, taking it seriously. And that's good because it makes me extra careful. Dr. Morrison smiled. But I've done this many times, and I'm very good at it. So you be scared if you need to be, but also trust me to take care of you. Okay? Your dad's going to walk with you as far as he can, and when you wake up, he'll be right there waiting. Deal? Deal? They let Ethan walk beside the gurney all the way to the operating room doors. Mia held his hand and Cloudhopper in a death grip, her eyes wide and frightened. At the doors, Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead. I love you more than anything in the world, baby. You're the bravest person I know. I love you too, Daddy. Then the anesthesiologist was putting the mask over her face, telling her to count backward from 10, and Mia's eyes were getting heavy. 10, 9, 8. She was asleep by 6. They wheeled her through the doors, and Ethan stood there watching until they disappeared around a corner. Then he walked to the surgical waiting room and sat down to wait. The room was full of other people doing the same thing. Worried families, nervous spouses, parents with that same hollowed-out look Ethan saw in the mirror. A community of people who understood that sometimes all you could do was wait and hope. His phone buzzed. Marcus. She's going to be fine, sending strength. Then Vivian. Thinking of you both. Call if you need anything. Then Angela, Jennifer, Dave, and 24 others from Meridian, all checking in, all offering support. Ethan put his phone away and sat in the hard plastic chair, staring at the clock on the wall. 7:45 a.m. Dr. Morrison had said 8 to 10 hours. That meant somewhere between 3:45 and 5:45 this afternoon, he'd know if his daughter was going to live. The waiting was worse than anything he'd ever experienced. Worse than the night his wife died. Worse than the day Mia was diagnosed. Worse than watching the Meridian system count down toward collapse. Because this time, he had no control. Couldn't fix it with code or skill or late nights at a terminal. All he could do was sit and wait and trust a surgeon he'd met twice. At 9:30, a nurse came out to update him. Dr. Morrison wanted me to let you know that everything's proceeding as expected. Mia's stable, and they're about a third of the way through. A third? It's been almost 2 hours. This is a complex surgery, Mr. Cole. We want to be thorough. After she left, Ethan stood up and walked to the windows. The view looked out over Boston, the city going about its business, while his daughter's chest was open on an operating table. He thought about the last 6 years, the choices he'd made, the things he'd given up, the person he'd become. A ghost in his own life, invisible and isolated, choosing survival over everything else. But also choosing Mia, always choosing Mia. And now he was learning that maybe you didn't have to choose. Maybe you could have people who cared and still protect what mattered. Maybe letting others in wasn't weakness, but a different kind of strength. His phone rang. Unknown number. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole, this is Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI. We met during the corporate espionage investigation. I remember. Is there a problem? No, actually the opposite. David Pearson just took a plea deal and gave us information on a larger network trying to steal classified defense technology. Your quick identification of the breach prevented what could have been a serious national security incident. We wanted to thank you personally. Ethan closed his eyes. I was just protecting a system I built. You were protecting a lot more than that. The protocols you designed prevented access to information that could have compromised military installations across the country. We're recommending you for a civilian commendation. I don't want a commendation. I just want my daughter to survive her surgery. Agent Chen was quiet for a moment. I didn't know. I'm sorry. We'll follow up another time. After she hung up, Ethan went back to his chair and put his head in his hands. At noon, a volunteer came around with sandwiches. Ethan took one but couldn't eat it. At 1:15, another update. Still proceeding well. More than halfway done. At 2:30, Vivian appeared in the waiting room. Ethan looked up in surprise. What are you doing here? Moral support. And I brought actual food because hospital sandwiches are terrible. She held up a bag from a deli. Turkey and Swiss, your favorite according to Marcus. Marcus told you my sandwich preference? Marcus has apparently been documenting everything about you like you're a research subject. It's a little weird, but also kind of sweet. She sat down next to him. How are you holding up? I'm not, but I'm here, so I guess that counts for something. Vivian pulled out the sandwich and handed it to him. Eat. You're not going to help Mia by passing out from low blood sugar. Ethan ate because arguing took energy he didn't have. The sandwich was good, and he realized he hadn't eaten since yesterday. You didn't have to drive all the way to Boston, he said. I wanted to. You've been helping everyone else for weeks. Let someone help you for once. They sat in silence for a while, watching the clock tick forward.
Can I ask you something? Vivian said eventually.
Sure.
Why did you stay? Not at Meridian, but in general. After your wife died. After Mia got sick. After everything fell apart. You could have walked away from all of it. Ethan looked at her. Walk away to where? This is my life. Mia is my life. You don't abandon the things that matter just because they're hard. A lot of people do. Then they never understood what they had in the first place.
Vivian nodded slowly. I think I spent 10 years building a company because I didn't have anything else worth building. No family, no real relationships, just work. And I told myself that was enough, that success meant something. She paused. But watching you, seeing what you'd sacrificed for Mia, what you gave up and what you refused to give up, it made me realize I've been measuring everything wrong. You're doing fine, Vivian. The company's successful. You've got people who respect you. Respect isn't the same as connection. Success isn't the same as purpose. She looked at him. You taught me that, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with that knowledge. Before Ethan could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Cole, Dr. Morrison would like to speak with you. Ethan's heart stopped. It was only 3:40, too early. Something was wrong. He stood up and Vivian grabbed his hand. Want me to come with you? Yeah, please. They followed the nurse to a small consultation room. Dr. Morrison was there, still in her surgical scrubs, pulling off her gloves. Ethan couldn't read her face. Is she? Mia's fine. The surgery went better than expected. We were able to repair the defect completely, and her heart is responding beautifully to the corrections. Ethan sat down because his legs gave out. She's okay? She's in recovery now. Still under anesthesia, but all her vitals are strong. She'll probably wake up in the next hour or so, and you can see her then. But you said 8 to 10 hours. It's only been... We finished early because there were no complications. Everything went smoothly. Dr. Morrison smiled. Your daughter is going to be fine, Mr. Cole. She's got a long recovery ahead, but the surgery was a complete success. Ethan put his face in his hands and felt something crack open in his chest. All the fear, all the waiting, all the careful control he'd maintained for 6 years just broke apart. Vivian put her hand on his shoulder and didn't say anything. Dr. Morrison gave them a few minutes, then explained the recovery process. 2 weeks in the hospital, 6 to 8 weeks of restricted activity at home, regular follow-ups for the next year. But if everything continued as expected, Mia would be able to do things she'd never been able to do before. Run without getting winded, play sports, live a normal life. Can I see her? Ethan asked. As soon as she's awake, the nurses will come get you. After Dr. Morrison left, Ethan and Vivian sat in the consultation room. She's going to be okay, Vivian said quietly. Yeah. Ethan wiped his eyes. She's going to be okay. His phone had been buzzing for the last few minutes. He pulled it out and saw dozens of messages from the Meridian team, all asking for updates. He sent a group text. Surgery successful. Mia's fine. Thank you all for everything. The responses came back immediately. Celebration emojis, congratulations, relief expressed in all caps and exclamation points. 20 minutes later, a nurse came to get him. She's asking for you. Ethan followed her to the pediatric recovery unit, where Mia was in a bed surrounded by monitors and machines, but her eyes were open and focused. Daddy? I'm here, baby. Right here. He took her hand, careful of the IVs and wires, and held it gently. Did they fix my heart? They did. Dr. Morrison said it went perfectly. Does that mean I won't be sick anymore? It means you're going to get stronger. You'll still need to take it easy for a while, but eventually you'll be able to do all the things other kids do. Mia smiled, drowsy from the anesthesia, but happy. Can I ride my bike without stopping? Yeah, baby, you can ride your bike without stopping. Can I run at recess? Absolutely. Can I play soccer? Ethan laughed, feeling tears on his face. You can play whatever you want. Mia squeezed his hand. You kept your promise. You were here when I woke up. I'll always keep my promises to you. She fell back asleep, and Ethan sat beside her bed, watching the monitors track her steady heartbeat. Vivian appeared in the doorway. I'm going to head back to the office. Let you two have some privacy. But call if you need anything, okay? Vivian,
Thank you for coming, for everything. That's what friends do. She smiled. Get some rest, both of you. The next 2 weeks were a blur of hospital routines, gradual improvements, small victories. Mia's color got better. Her energy increased. The tremors stopped. Every day she looked more like a normal 8-year-old and less like a fragile thing that might break. The Meridian team showed up in shifts. Marcus brought card games and played Go Fish with Mia for hours. Angela brought books and read to her when Ethan needed to sleep. Jennifer smuggled in better food than the hospital cafeteria offered. Dave taught Mia magic tricks that made her laugh. Even Vivian came by 3 times, awkward around children but trying, bringing puzzles and stuffed animals, and once, inexplicably, a potted plant that the nurses had to relocate because of hospital regulations. On the day they were discharged, Dr. Morrison gave Ethan a list of restrictions and guidelines, warning signs to watch for, follow-up appointments already scheduled. She's doing remarkably well, Dr. Morrison said. But recovery takes time. Don't rush it. I won't. And Mr. Cole, take care of yourself too. You look exhausted. I will. But he probably wouldn't, because taking care of himself had never been the priority. The drive back home took 4 hours with stops for Mia to rest. When they finally pulled into their driveway, Ethan noticed something different. The house had been painted. The fence had been repaired. The front yard had been cleaned up. And on the porch was a wheelchair ramp that definitely hadn't been there before. Ethan helped Mia out of the car and walked her to the front door, which opened before he could reach it. Marcus stood there with a key in his hand, looking sheepish. We might have done some work while you were gone. Hope that's okay. Ethan looked past him into the house. It had been cleaned, organized, restocked. The medical equipment had been upgraded and repositioned for easier access. There were fresh groceries in the kitchen and prepared meals in the freezer. You broke into my house? Vivian called it supportive home improvement. I called it, we have your spare key from HR and wanted to help. Marcus handed him the key. Everything's been sanitized and set up for Mia's recovery. We also installed better Wi-Fi so you can work from home more easily. Ethan didn't know what to say. Angela appeared from the kitchen. There's a schedule on the fridge for meal deliveries and help with Mia if you need it. No pressure, just options. Jennifer was sitting on the couch. We also set up a care coordination system. Just text the group if you need anything, and someone will handle it. Ethan looked at all these people who'd invaded his space and his privacy and his carefully maintained independence, and felt something give way inside him. Thank you, he said quietly. This is too much, but thank you. It's not too much, Marcus said. It's what you do for family. And that word, family, hit Ethan harder than anything else. Because somewhere in the last month, these people had become that. Not coworkers or acquaintances, but family in the way that mattered. People who showed up, people who cared, people who understood that sometimes you needed help whether you asked for it or not. Over the next 6 weeks, Ethan learned to accept support the way he'd never been able to before. He let people bring meals, let them sit with Mia when he needed to sleep, let them help with the small things that added up to survival. And slowly, Mia got stronger. She started walking without getting winded, started laughing more, started drawing pictures that weren't just hearts and hospitals, but cats and rainbows and imaginary adventures. The doctors were amazed at her progress. Dr. Reeves cried at one appointment, happy tears, telling Ethan that Mia's recovery was the best she'd seen in 15 years. At the 8-week follow-up, Dr. Morrison cleared Mia for light activity. Start slow. Walking, gentle play. We'll reassess in another month and potentially clear her for more. Ethan took Mia to the park that afternoon, just a small park near their house with swings and a slide and a sandbox. Mia stood at the edge of the playground, looking at it like it was Disneyland. Can I really play? Dr. Morrison said you could. Just take it easy. She walked to the swings, didn't run, wasn't quite ready for that, and sat down. Ethan pushed her gently, and she laughed, the sound pure and happy and completely normal. Higher, Daddy. Not too high yet. We're taking it slow, remember? But he pushed a little higher, and she laughed a little harder, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan let himself believe that maybe everything was going to be okay. That night, he went back to work at Meridian for the first time since the surgery. The Wednesday night group had continued without him.
And when he walked into Building C, he found 30 people gathered around Terminal 7, working through problems together. They erupted in applause when they saw him. "The architect returns," Marcus announced, and people crowded around to ask about Mia, to welcome him back, to pull him immediately into a problem they'd been stuck on for days. Ethan fell back into the rhythm like he'd never left. Explaining architecture, solving problems, teaching people how to think about systems instead of just coding them. But it felt different now. Not like a solitary thing he did alone in the dark, but like part of something bigger. A community of people learning together, building together, growing together. At 2 a.m., after everyone else had gone home, Marcus stayed behind. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were? Before the crisis, I mean. You could have claimed credit for the system, could have demanded recognition, could have made things easier for yourself." Ethan thought about it. Because credit doesn't fix a broken heart. Recognition doesn't pay for surgery. Making myself visible wouldn't have changed anything that mattered. But it might have changed how people treated you. Maybe. But I wasn't doing the work for how people treated me. I was doing it because it needed to be done, and I was the only one who could do it properly. Marcus nodded slowly. That's the difference, isn't it? Between people who work for recognition and people who work because it matters. I guess so. Which one do you think I am? Ethan looked at him. I think you started as the first kind and you're becoming the second. That's growth. That's good. Marcus smiled. You're a weird teacher, you know that? Half janitor, half philosopher, all genius. I'm just a guy trying to take care of his daughter. You're a lot more than that, but I get why you lead with that part. 3 months after the surgery, Mia went back to school full-time. Ethan drove her on the first day, nervous in a way he hadn't been in years. What if I get tired? Mia asked. Then you tell Mrs. Patterson and you rest, but I think you're going to be fine. What if the other kids ask about my scar? The surgery had left a line down her chest, visible when she wore certain shirts. Mia was self-conscious about it. Then you tell them it's from when doctors fixed your heart so you could be strong. And anyone who gives you trouble about it answers to me. Mia giggled. You're not scary, Daddy. I built a system that locked down a billion-dollar company. I'm a little bit scary. She hugged him before getting out of the car. I love you. I love you too, baby. Have a good day. He watched her walk into the school, steady on her feet, no tremor in her hands, looking like any other kid heading to class. And he finally let himself believe it was real. That afternoon, Vivian called with a proposal. The Pentagon consulting contract is moving forward. They want you to lead the adaptation of the manual layer for 3 classified installations. It's a 2-year project, fully remote, your own hours, and the compensation is significant. How significant? Enough that you'd never have to worry about money again. Enough that Mia's medical bills would be a rounding error instead of a crisis. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What about my role at Meridian? You keep it. This is supplemental. The Pentagon work is maybe 10 hours a week on your schedule. Everything else stays the same. Why me? There are plenty of security architects who don't understand the philosophy behind the work the way you do. The Pentagon doesn't just want technical specs, Ethan. They want your approach to building systems that require human judgment. They want what you created. He thought about it. Thought about Mia, about stability, about the future he could give her if he said yes. I'll do it. But I need it in writing that if Mia needs me, everything else stops. No negotiation, no exceptions. Already in the contract, I learned from last time. The Pentagon work started a month later, and it was exactly what Vivian promised. Interesting problems, flexible hours, good pay, no pressure to be someone he wasn't. Ethan settled into a new normal. Days with Mia, nights at Meridian teaching and maintaining systems, occasional consulting calls with military engineers who treated him with respect that felt unearned but genuine. The Wednesday night sessions grew into something official. Meridian formalized them as Architectural Workshop, with Ethan as the lead instructor. They offered it to employees across all departments, and the waiting list was 3 months long. Vivian restructured the entire company around the principles she'd learned from watching Ethan. Flexible scheduling became standard. Skills assessment replaced title-based evaluation. The culture shifted from ruthless ambition to collaborative growth. It wasn't perfect. Companies never were. But it was better. 6 months after Mia's surgery, Dr. Morrison cleared her for full activity. Her heart function is excellent. She's exceeded every recovery benchmark. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. That weekend, Ethan took Mia to a bike shop and bought her a new bicycle, bright blue with a bell and a basket and streamers on the handlebars. They went to the park, and Ethan held the bike while Mia climbed on. "You ready?" "Yeah, but don't let go yet." "I won't let go until you tell me to." He ran beside her, one hand on the seat, watching her pedal and steer and find her balance. "Okay," she said after a few minutes. "You can let go now." Ethan let go. Mia kept pedaling, wobbly at first but gaining confidence, and then she was riding on her own, circling the path, laughing with pure joy. Ethan stood there watching his daughter ride her bike without stopping, without getting tired, without her heart giving out, and felt everything he'd sacrificed and struggled for become worth it. She rode for 20 minutes before getting tired, and when she finally stopped, she was breathing hard but smiling. "Did you see me, Daddy? I did it." "I saw. You were amazing. Can we do it again tomorrow?" "We can do it every day if you want." That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open. He was working on a proposal for the Pentagon, sketching out a new approach to authentication protocols, but his mind kept drifting. He thought about the last year, the crisis, the firing, the surgery, the slow rebuilding of a life he'd thought was permanently broken. He thought about Vivian, who'd learned that power meant nothing without purpose. He thought about Marcus and the team, who'd learned that the best work often came from the quietest places. He thought about Mia, who'd survived and thrived and become the strong, happy kid he'd always hoped she could be. And he thought about himself. The choices he'd made, the things he'd given up, the way he'd measured success not by what he achieved, but by what he protected. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Got stuck on a routing problem. Any chance you're awake?" Ethan smiled and typed back, "Always." "What's the issue?" They worked through it over text for 30 minutes, and Ethan solved it the way he always did, by understanding the foundation and working from there. "You're a lifesaver," Marcus texted. "Literally don't know what we'd do without you. You'd figure it out. You're smarter than you think." "Maybe. But I'm smarter because you taught me how to think about this stuff. That matters." After Marcus signed off, Ethan sat in the quiet of his kitchen and realized something. He'd spent 6 years invisible because he thought that was the price of protecting Mia. He'd believed that being seen meant being vulnerable, that asking for help meant being weak, that doing everything alone was the only way to make sure it got done right. But he'd been wrong. Being seen meant being connected. Asking for help meant building community. Doing things together meant they lasted longer and mattered more. He wasn't just a janitor who'd saved a company. He was a father who'd saved his daughter. He was a teacher who'd changed how people thought about their work. He was a man who'd learned that strength wasn't about carrying everything alone, but about knowing when to let others carry some of it with you. The world had finally seen his genius, sure. But his greatest achievement wasn't the system he'd built, or the crisis he'd resolved, or the contracts he'd secured. It was the quiet love of a 32-year-old single father who'd chosen his daughter first, rebuilt his life around what mattered, and somehow managed to save everyone else along the way, not because he was trying to be a hero, but because he understood that the things worth protecting were worth protecting properly. And in the end, that understanding changed everything. Ethan closed his laptop, checked on Mia one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her heart beating strong and steady, and finally let himself rest. Tomorrow, they'd ride bikes again. Tomorrow, he'd teach another workshop. Tomorrow, he'd keep building the life he'd fought so hard to protect. But tonight, in the quiet of a house that was no longer